In this episode of the Apothecary Diaries, MaoMao is called upon for a rather interesting little mystery, especially since it has nothing to do with anything medically related, which gives our girl MaoMao a chance to kind of think in a different way. Instead, this mystery revolves around three brothers and three items they were left by their now deceased father. And when it comes to these three items, it is rather interesting how they all come together, because the three items in question were a shack, well-crafted furniture, and a fishbowl. Now, how all three of these end up becoming part of like a puzzle is rather interesting, and how MaoMao has to figure out how each of these items kind of play into each other. Especially since this piece of furniture in question is just like a very fancy dresser, and then you have this fishbowl, which has a really nice design of a flower carved onto the front of it. And then you have the shack itself, where all these items are supposed to come together and somehow accomplish a goal of some kind, which we find out that goal is to unlock this really fancy dresser that the father had designed. Now let's go back to the puzzle itself for a moment. It seems the way this puzzle functioned is that the shack itself is in a specific position, which allows the sunlight to enter in a certain way. And then, when placing the fishbowl in a certain spot in this shack and making sure it is properly filled with water, the sun will proceed to shine through it, creating kind of a focus point of light that ends up heating up the keyhole section of the dresser. Initially, they were unable to fit the key inside this specific keyhole on the dresser because it was blocked by something or other. However, after placing the fishbowl and filling it with water, with the sun shining through, the focus beam of light that it creates seems to melt something within the lock, which we find out was some type of very soft metal with a low melting point, which the light ended up causing to melt into a different key, which was a pretty crafty trick, if I must say. Then, once this new key was made by these pieces being brought together in this way, they were finally able to unlock the drawer on this dresser they were unable to open. But when they look inside, they don't really understand the items within. But it's thanks to the little brother bringing up some things that the father had said before he had died about the other two brothers, that they finally realized what these items that were inside this dresser were all about. And what the little brother ends up telling the other two is that the dad did truly care about them, and he also admired the aspects that they were really good at, especially with the eldest brother being really good with being meticulous and paying close attention to things, while the second oldest brother was really good with people and communicating with others. And the dad wanted them to realize their talents outside of just being craftsmen, because the youngest brother excelled best at being a craftsman, but he wanted the other two to realize that they had also really important jobs to play. And by the end, one of them ends up being like the communications expert who gathers more customers and so on, and the eldest brother becomes like the bookkeeper, while the youngest brother maintains the position of craftsman. And now that they're all working together this way, their business is doing much better. And all three of the brothers are finally getting along far better than they were in the past. All thanks to the dad's little hint he left behind about wanting them to become close again, where he's like, gather all these items and have a tea party like you guys used to in the past. Now, we seem to be gearing up for something else, because there's a scene towards the end of the episode where Lacan and Jinshi have another interaction, where Jinshi brings up the question of, what was it you did to lower the value of a courtesan? Which Lacan avoids by saying, that's a question you should ask someone who lives in that world. And of course, this wasn't exactly the answer Jinshi was looking for. So, this seems to spur Jinshi to take a different action, which then he proceeds to call upon MaoMao. And then, once she arrives, He then proceeds, "I need you to help me with my makeup." And then MaoMao ends with going, "Huh?" And this is exactly where the episode cuts off, unfortunately. But here's my theory about what's going on here. Due to what Lacan said about asking somebody who lives in that world to figure out what the meaning behind lowering the value of a courtesan, this has led me to think that Jinshi means to infiltrate a courtesan house. Potentially the Verde house that MaoMao is from, just because of her connections with it, and he might have an easier in there. So my guess is, as I was saying, that he's going to go undercover as a courtesan to figure out the answers to these questions. This is where I believe they're going with it, which will be kind of interesting. Undercover agent Jinshi disguised as a lovely courtesan. Luckily, Jinshi's not going to have too much issue disguising himself as a lovely lady, because people already find him very beautiful, both men and women, as he is now. I can just imagine how much prettier he looks with a little makeup added. So, with that said, I look forward to the next episode, and I hope you guys do too. Mr. Haori, out.